Hello, I am Elites. You might remember me from other videos that I've made before, but this is a different video. This is a new video. This one's coming out now, unless you're watching this in the future, in which case, maybe it's new information for you, but not for me. I actually thought all this stuff like a week ago. So, is it past? Is it present? Is it future? I don't know anymore. I can still talk about a movie occasionally, so today we're gonna do that. David Lynch is a director.
Bullshit. Total fucking bullshit.
I've talked about them before. You've probably heard me talk about them as they got a decent amount of views on the internet.
Same fucking thing as last time.
Inland Empire is a film directed by David Lynch that came out in December of 2006 or September in 2006, depending on if you were in Venice. It was shot on the Sony PD-150, a shit camera, but a fun camera to make a 3-hour-long movie with. The good people over at Criterion have just released Inland Empire on 4K video for you to stream on your fucking telephone.
It's such a sadness that you think you've seen a film on your fucking telephone. Get real.
The film has recently been remastered to 4K home video quality footage from 2006 in 4K? What?
Evil was born and followed the boy.
It's funny to think about because it seems kind of impossible, and as some people have stated on the internet, kind of missing the point. See, the film is supposed to look like garbage, but now it looks better than garbage. The cleanest garbage you've ever seen. It's so pristine. It's so clean. You'll watch it and be like, wow. How much longer is this movie? A weird art piece, that's the big thing to know about it, and you've probably seen the movie if you've clicked on this video. Inland Empire is a 3-hour-long movie that many people have said moves their soul in a direction, some direction, and makes no sense at all. Many people would argue they have no idea what's going on in the movie. Many people would walk out of a theater where this was playing for 3 hours in 4K and say, wow, what? So that's why I am here. I saw an opportunity to step in front of a camera and tell you just what the fuck is going on in Inland Empire.
Is that a fucking cow on the street?
Some kind of cow.
Wait.
Yo, dude.
What is that?
Dude, check it out. It's David Lynch.
Oh my god, is that fucking David Lynch?
It's made. Okay, get it? If you want to see the greatest performance of 2006, check out Laura Dern's performance in Inland Empire.
So before we get too in the weeds here, I think it's important to mention why the movie looks like that. If you've seen any of David Lynch's movies, you know that most of them are shot on film, 35mm film, and they look gorgeous. This one, on the other hand, really weird. So why does it look like that? Why is this a choice that was made? What is the artistic intent behind doing this? So first we'll talk about the practical. This is something that David Lynch has talked about a lot, is the practical workflow of digital film is way easier than shooting on 35mm. For 35mm, you have a very limited amount of data, film, that you can work with, and it all is expensive. You have to buy it, you have to print it, you have to look at it. So it helps to have a really long and clear plan as to how you're going to be working on the film. David Lynch, on the other hand, kind of likes to do a thing where he just dreams up an idea, he thinks about it, and then he just shoots it, which is hard to do and expensive when you're working with 35mm films. So in 2006, David Lynch was like, here's an idea, I'll just buy a shitty camcorder and I'll just start shooting things with that. And then whenever I think of a crazy idea, I can just film it right then and there. I can just call up Laura Dern, she can come over to my crazy castle and we can just film this son of a bitch. It's a good workflow for him. He kind of used the same thing on The Return. Ended up in dividends. Everybody likes The Return. But also the film is 3 hours long because every idea that he had, filmed it and then put it in the movie somewhere. And you just have to figure out why it's there. Haha, Joker's trick.
It starts inspiring something that I call an experiment. I don't know what is going on. I'm so depressed, I don't know what I'm doing.
We like to think that David Lynch is not the kind of person who just picks up a camera and goes, "This is the one I'm gonna film on." Is that a good impression? Do you like that impression? Yeah, you like it? Okay. This man thinks about what he does artistically. See, this is where we get into speculation because I don't know because he doesn't tell us, but I have my own ideas, and my ideas are that when I see this footage and I think about 2006, I think of two things. I think of soap operas, which are like, really low budget, really wonky lighting, really cheap cameras. They're not meant to really look like reality. They look like hyper reality, just like totally different than the way that we're supposed to perceive movies. The content of them is usually like very base level, like dramas, like people cheating on each other, people being pregnant, you know what I mean? And then there's BTS footage, like behind the scenes stuff. So if you're ever working on a movie, some annoying asshole, probably me, is following you around with a camcorder, filming your every move and thought as if it has significance. You just have to continue doing your job. There's like this level of filming people making a movie, in my opinion, is why the movie looks like that. So it's good to think about that before we get into it because sure, this doesn't look like a movie in the traditional way, but it functions like a movie in these more broad terms. So I have to think about it as an art piece. And this is, of course, a really nice segue into talking about the difference between life and cinema. As much as we like to watch a movie and be like, wow, this is just like me, or this is a human story that makes sense to me. Life and cinema are different. That's why every time you see a biopic, you're like, that's not true, because cinema is like a stylized version of reality. See, David Lynch is obsessed with dreams. That's like his whole thing. He's like really dream-pilled, and cinema is kind of like the dream of reality that can never truly be reality. And of course, this works really well with the fact that this thing is shot on a camcorder because that line is slightly blurred.
Who are those people?
Hey! Hello! It's good to see you. Come in, come in. Get some hot dogs.
Given everything that I've just told you, the context of what the movie is supposed to kind of look like, and also why it looks like that, and also the fact that David Lynch has this weird dream obsession and how this kind of blurs the line between cinema and reality, gets us to the main problem, which is that the movie came out in 2006. I've heard no one explain the movie to me in a way that makes any logical, coherent sense. I have read the wiki. I have watched every video I possibly could watch about it. I've read all the articles, and I still feel like everybody's perspective on it is kind of muddled. This is not a dig to anybody who has attempted to analyze the movie. I'm sure there's probably some fucking analysis video that somebody's gonna link to me and be like, actually, you should read this. It's better than yours. I like to believe that if something is muddled, if people aren't understanding something, it's not for no reason. One has to assume that that's either through inattention and carelessness or it's intentional. I like David Lynch's movies. I've seen them all. Many of them are confusing in many different ways, and most people have a hard time understanding what's going on in them, even though sometimes they're fairly straightforward. That line being blurred makes that intentionality kind of come to life. So what we're gonna do today, after 15 minutes of video already, is talk about what the fuck is going on in Inland Empire, and is it possible to analyze this film without confusing people further or making people link me other articles. I would like to be somewhat definitive. Analyzing things, a lot of times people just watch something and they're just like, okay, I think it's like that. That's kind of limited. You should go in with a plan, a strategy, if you will. Things actually work kind of in a reverse chronological order. Not to say that the movie is backwards or something like that, but we should look at it kind of non-linearly. We might get more out of it instead of just trying to see it in a linear fashion, because so much stuff happens in supposedly linear order, but if we break it up into pieces, I think it paints a broader picture than if we just kind of beat for beat just go through and be like, this is what that I think if we want to analyze the film, we should kind of do it backwards and not in the most like straightforward way. Because if we do it in the straightforward way, there's going to be stuff that we either are confused by or miss because it doesn't really work on a beat for beat basis. I recently saw Mulholland Drive in a theater. Makes complete and total sense to me. I'm never confused by the film. However, after the movie, I was walking into the lobby and there were plenty of people in front of me that were saying, wow, I sure love that movie, but I have no idea what's going on in it, which I felt was a bit on the nose. I thought it was kind of wild that someone would just dead ass say the exact thing I'm making a point about, but lo, it happened. And as I said, in my opinion, that is one of the more straightforward of David Lynch's movies. The point that I bring up with that is that that movie makes total sense if you work backwards. If you just start with the ending of the movie and you're like, okay, what's going on in the ending of the movie? Start back at the beginning of the movie, you're like, oh, okay, I understand what's going on here. It makes sense to start with the beginning stuff and the ending stuff and see if those two things connect, and then we go from there. So the movie starts with a woman watching TV. It starts with an actress being told some really spooky shit by a woman before she gets cast in a role to be in a cursed movie.
A little boy went out to play. When he opened his door, he saw the world. As he passed through the doorway, he caused a reflection. Evil was born.
Those are like the two main things that are established really early on, other than a room full of rabbits and a bunch of other confusing shit. So the movie she's in is about infidelity, dereliction, murder, based on jealousy.
On High and Blue Tomorrows is in fact a remake.
It's a remake.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do a remake.
No, I know, of course, but you didn't know. The original was a different name. It started, it was never finished.
So as we go into the end of the movie and talk about it, it is now an important time for me to tell you why we're doing this and how this functions narratively. Why talk about the end of a movie now? A thing I want to bring up, I've brought it up in the past, is that the end of any piece of art is the conceit. It's the moment where the artist is basically grabbing you by the shoulders and being like, this is what I'm talking about, my dude. A lot of people like to explain the ending of a movie as if plot matters and shit like that, but they don't get down to the real bare bones elements of what the movie is trying to say artistically, even though that too is revealed in an ending. So if we do that, then we can think about the whole thing in terms of other things, and then everything will start to make different kinds of sense. You have to look at movies kind of like an argumentative essay. You know, you open with your thesis statement. You got 3 body paragraphs, and then at the end, you restate the thesis, only this time we have new understanding because of the events. So the end of the movie shows some very key things. Laura Dern's character ends up derelict and then murdered on the street by her co-star's partner after she becomes jealous. And while this moment might completely blend the cinema and the reality of the cinema, the camera pans back and we reveal that this was part of the movie. Mind-blowing moment if you've seen the movie, because at that point you have no idea what is fiction and what is not fiction within the fiction that you're watching. So yeah, she dies on the street and then the camera pans back and then she's just kind of awakened and she says no other words in the rest of the movie. She's completely mute for the remainder of the film. She's just kind of in a completely ethereal state. She's like this. Don't we love visual aids? So in my opinion, what this is trying to say is that there's some level of parallel between her life and the life of the character that she's playing, that that death and those consequences feel very traumatic for her to play. The role itself does damage to her psyche. So for the remainder of the movie, she just genuinely feels like she's received the consequences for the things that she's living through. And then she goes to a theater to watch herself, a horror. This is a common practice, obviously, that if you act in a movie, you're gonna watch the movie that you're in. This is taken to like a weird meta-narrative fictional level where she's like the only one there and she's watching herself, and it makes her run off into another room and commit a murder. That's one of those like specific semiotic moments where you're like, okay, so someone's watching themselves on screen, realizing the weight of the role that they've played and what that does for their life. So because of that, they have to take action because they can't ignore it anymore, kind of thing. So then she runs into another room and she kills off the predisposed antagonist known as the Phantom, who is supposedly the guy who's like puppeteering everybody and hypnotizing everybody into doing all the things throughout the movie. But the assumption is that this kind of like hypnotizes her into a state of control. It has some kind of parallel with her life directly. Again, the line is blurred. However, she sees her own face, this face, as the Phantom dies. If I was to assume, I would say that it has something to do with killing the face of trauma. You're like seeing your own feeling on the person that you're like killing. It's very literal, but also very non-literal. See, that's another weird thing about David Lynch's movies is like they're really hard to interpret because everything is literal. Like if it's something that has like some thematic meaning, it just literally happens, and then you have to think about it thematically. It's both esoteric and direct. The woman at the beginning of the movie who's crying and watching TV is freed and can like return to her family, who's happy and she's happy, and there's some kind of weird something there. But before she does that, Laura Dern enters her room and then they embrace. Laura Dern disappears, and the girl who's crying in the room like sees herself on TV. There's the two parallel things that are going on where Laura Dern sees herself on screen in a theater and decides to take action. And then the person watching at home is empathizing with the thing, which then makes her take action. Her leaving the room kind of feels like the moment like right after you finish watching a movie where all of the nerves, all of the things you're thinking of, they're kind of like a dream, and then you go back to your like waking life. There's this stark difference between dreams and waking life because the viewer can empathize with something for a while and then return to their prior life. My dog just farted. I wish that I was joking. It feels like such a big-ass cop-out to immediately make the claim that I'm going to make, but oh well, here I go. David sees movies as a dream that is shared between the cast and the audience. So it's like a collective sort of dream thing where they're in the dream and also making the dream, and we're watching the dream, experiencing it, and being inside of it. So we're all kind of inside the dream. There's that bit in the Return where, oh, well, if this is a dream, then who is the dreamer? It's David Lynch. He's the dreamer. Yeah, they know they're on a TV show, and we know we're watching a TV show, but now we're empathizing with the thing, experiencing the thing, thinking about the fact that someone dreamed all this up, that it's not real. It's like to intentionally take you out of it and make you see it differently, as well as the cast and characters that are in the piece of art itself. Brings the narrative, like the meta-narrative of the thing, the fact that it is created and is not real, to the forefront, bring up larger truths about the way that we're experiencing the thing and how easy it is to fall into something that's really, really good. I think about the scene in Mulholland Drive where Naomi Watts walks into a room and starts acting against another actor. The camera moves in, and then moments later, we completely forget that they're in a room with all of these other people. Suddenly, we're just engaging with the movie itself. We're no longer thinking about the actors or the fact that they're in a thing. It's like multiple layers of abstraction that we completely fall into, and then when it pulls us back out, it makes us feel silly for having engaged in that level of abstraction without that awareness. So there's like this meta-narrative bent to a lot of what David Lynch is doing. There are multiple layers of abstraction, and he's seeing how far we can fall into those layers without realizing, and how easy it is for us to fall into narratives. Dream within a dream within a dream. Literally literalization, there's like these dimensions of it where we don't know if the version of Laura Dern that we're seeing in the movie, the character that she's playing, the character that Laura Dern is playing, or Laura Dern herself. We don't really know to what extent we're seeing reality or not. So in dreams, things are impossible. Impossible things become possible. An actress can become another person, and an audience gets to experience a new dimension of possibilities. It's kind of like the moment in Inland Empire where she like pokes the hole in the shirt and looks through it. We're looking through a hole and seeing a completely different reality than our own. We have a bunch of lights and mirrors, and suddenly we're in a completely different world. When you dream, you frequently dream things that are impossible, like the people that love you secretly hating you, the things that you're afraid of suddenly becoming real, and sometimes also actualizing aspects of yourself that you wish were possible but are not. This occasionally makes waking life feel like a relief. When you wake up, you're like, oh, thank God. So cinema is that as well. And when the girl stops watching the movie that's in the movie that's in the movie in Inland Empire, she feels relief to be back in her waking life, and she feels like she's learned something and is carrying that with her. And then, of course, when Laura Dern awakes from the confines of being a different person in a movie setting, thinks about like the place that her like oppression lives, and she kills it. Awful as a nightmare is, it has a function. The function of it is to make us make changes in our actual day-to-day life, or appreciate the life that we have that isn't the narrative that we're given in a dream. And if we take that a step further, if cinema is dreams, cinema is meant to do the exact same thing. We're just dreaming while awake and while cognizant and while we can actually think about what's happening. But Inland Empire is a movie that challenges that notion by putting us through multiple layers of abstraction to not only externalized version of where those dreams come from and how they're manufactured, but also how both sides of it fall into that thing. That takes us into further levels of abstraction, and it's really hard to like wake up from those levels of abstraction, yet we accept it in our day-to-day life as if it's just fact. So as I said, we're doing more thematic interpretation of what's going on in Inland Empire because the literal interpretation of it would be very muddled and confusing, and the movie's 3 hours long. So if I was to go through literally everything beat for beat and tell you what's happening in it, it would be difficult because in dreams things don't particularly make sense. So the only thing we can really do with our dreams is interpret our dreams. David Lynch's movies ask us to interpret them as if they were dreams instead of looking at them through this like literal level where it's like Laura Dern was actually asleep the whole movie. Laura Dern is secretly actually the derelict woman who's imagining that she's in a movie. The last 15 minutes is actually what she sees after she dies, or something ridiculous like that.
The skies above the blue.
So we are going to dive into some of the details just to reinforce a lot of the themes and see if any like sub-themes pop up. If you're looking for a literal beat-for-beat translation of what you're seeing, you're probably not going to find it because that's not how the film is meant to be watched. I read a thing online about how the whole movie is like about the things that the Polish movie they're making is about, and there's also all this lore about who all these characters are and how they have all this significance in the story. So in the opening of the movie, there is a scene where a woman tells Laura Dern about all these like Polish myths or something. She says a bunch of key things that are true of the narrative that we're about to experience as if it were a key to unlocking the door of the movie itself.
You have a new role to play, I hear. Is it about marriage? Your husband, he's involved, lost in the marketplace, as if half-born. Not through the marketplace, you see that, don't you? But through the alley, behind the marketplace. It isn't something you remember. Forgetfulness. It happens to us all. Me, I can't seem to remember if it's today, 2 days from now, or yesterday. I suppose if it was 9:45, I'd think it was after midnight. If today was tomorrow, you wouldn't even remember that you owed on an unpaid bill. Actions do have consequences. There is the magic.
She just tells us what is past, what is present, what is future, what's actually linearly going on. You wouldn't even know if you saw it. It's something that's fabricated and being given to you. So if it's being fabricated and given to you, you can't necessarily assume that what you're seeing has that dimension of meaning. If you make some kind of effort, like if you leave the house, right, a demon is born, an effort or like some kind of artistic effort or putting some kind of thing out in the world sometimes has consequences. Demons follow action. So if you do something, evil can manifest the fact that you took action on anything.
The original was a different name. It started, it was never finished. The film was never finished. Something happened before the film was finished. After the characters had been filming for some time, they discovered something inside the story. The two leads were murdered. The title in German was 4-7, 4-7. And it was said to be cursed. So it turned out to be.
They're in a cursed movie. What is the curse? Is every movie cursed? Is David Lynch trying to argue that the curse is some sort of inherent thing about how we experience cinema? Yes, it's simply a detachment from reality. And you have to take action to both see a movie and also be in a movie. Evil darkness thing follows the action of either having made the movie or having gone and seen the movie. There is some kind of curse within the film itself, steps on everybody who experiences it inherently in every movie. At one point, Laura Dern completely detaches from reality and she's sitting in a room with a whole bunch of women that are all talking about the same guy.
I really thought you would last, you two.
I saw it coming. I'm sorry, I did.
He was the one. I really thought he was. So what? He's gone.
Find someone else.
It's not easy when you feel like shit.
They're talking about how they're sad that that guy isn't in their life anymore and Laura Dern is crying. So there's some implication that there was a guy in her life that doesn't love her anymore or something like that. But in the movie, there's a couple of guys that could potentially be, but we're led to assume that it's her co-star, not realizing that that too could be a part of the narrative, which is revealed at the end of the movie. So I think that that's more to imply is engaging with the characters and that the whole bit is her acting and she's in the part of the movie where she has lost the co-star. It's also possible happening at her house, other actresses that are in the movie, so they're all just sitting in a room talking about that guy. It blurs the line between what's really happening and what's not happening, but either way, they do the locomotion. Her husband in real life is mad at the co-star of the movie that she's in before he puts moves on her or something, which is meant to, I think, imply that she has a shitty marriage. Also, that too could be a thing that's happening in the movie itself because the movie they're making in the movie Inland Empire is a movie about that exact thing. So it's hard to say whether she's playing herself or if she's playing the role, but also the names are meant to be signifiers of where in the narrative we are, but also the names begin to get really blurred throughout time, so it becomes immensely difficult to tell the difference. So we just have to assume that at some level of the narrative, this is meant to be a thing that's expressed. There is a lot of stuff in David Lynch's work that's about rabbits. I think what he's implying is that human beings are like rabbits. Would anyone like to help me with that?
I'm going to find out one day.
It was red.
Where was I?
This isn't the way it was.
If you were to look at human beings from a distance, they would resemble animals. Like, if you don't understand the narratives of which people are living within, they just look like animals. They just look like rabbits. The fact that rabbits are like personified has some significance in the sense that we're talking about the narratives themselves and not any of the individuals. A lot of what David Lynch is trying to do in his movies has a lot to do with like collective reality, or the things that we deal with that are not based on an individual basis or one's own personal narrative, but the narratives, like the through lines of the dream. And so if we're all like just rabbits in this like collective dream, then there are significant things that are through lines through the fact that we are carried by narrative. And then we're going to talk about what those narratives are, or what that narrative is. There is a distinct point where Laura Dern is implied to be living in the house that the girl is living in at the very beginning / end of the movie, where she's in the room crying. That's clearly meant to represent that she is basically becoming that woman and stepping into that woman's life, which is an empathy thing. Like, if you're watching a story and there's an enveloping narrative, you fall into that person's narrative. And the reason you can do that is because there are semi-universal themes that are like going throughout most stories, depending on what those stories are and who's perceiving them. Empathy is when we watch somebody on a screen and we feel their feelings, or we like understand their situation. And we can only really understand their situation if we have some level of understanding of that emotional existence. So that connection is formed by some deep shared truth. What are those deep shared truths, and how do they connect with all people universally? As I said, a lot of things in David Lynch's movies are just blatant. Like, he'll just say the thing that he's trying to say. It's just straightforward. And when you see something straightforward about something like a deep shared emotional truth that carries throughout all of humanity, it's kind of stark and it makes it feel like surreal, like it's not real. One of those major connecting things, women's trauma. Like, the story is very much about women's trauma and about the narratives that women are led to lead. Women feeling trauma at the hands of abusive men. Story has some sort of weight to it because we're all experiencing that story to some extent. Like, we all have an understanding of that narrative. Therefore, when we watch a story about it, we don't necessarily need to be told that the story is blatantly saying that for us to feel like it's about that. Put all of these meta narratives together, woman who's experiencing trauma playing a woman who's experiencing trauma with a woman who's empathetically reacting to that trauma, and there's like this universality to the concept of women's trauma that's being experienced throughout the entire, like every possible angle of the story. And that meta narrative is not just talking about like women's trauma in the here and now and how we can empathize with somebody going through that, but that it's kind of a tale as old as time. It's always been here. It's always been widely debated, always been a story that human beings have engaged in. When we look at the way that Inland Empire is filmed, it kind of looks like a soap opera. And what happens on a soap opera, an interaction with this particular meta-narrative, it almost always has something to do with the story of women's trauma, a pregnancy, infidelity, the hands of an abusive man. If you go to any Lifetime movie, that's what you're going to see. General stories that have been told for a really long time, maybe forever. Maybe they've always been told. If that's true, then maybe that's the like inherent curse of this movie. It carries with it this particular tale as old as time that is in no way getting changed, altered, or broken. It's not fixing it. It simply is bringing up the fact that we've been talking about this for centuries. In the movie Inland Empire, there's also a radio, like, station. And the radio station did a teleplay or a radio play of the same movie that's being made. So if Inland Empire is about that same story that's being told through the movie that they're making in the movie, that's something that people empathize with. And within the narrative of the movie, there's also this story being told elsewhere, and they tried to make the movie before, but then people got murdered. It seems like there's some sort of universality to the fact that this story is being told time and time again in different iterations over and over. Perhaps the movie's not just saying this movie is about women's trauma, but that a lot of narrative is about women's trauma, or that is an inherent meta-narrative that exists throughout most, if not all, art.
Kingsley, get to the point.
Kind of like the idea of murder. Murder is constantly being talked about everywhere because murder is like one of the big human narratives. Infidelity is one of the big human worries. So if we're empathizing with them, even if they're really general, we still experience that empathy. If not, we experience it more because these things are just like blatant, deep truths. The soap opera behind the scenes footage vibe makes a lot of sense because this is something that goes on in our real world that we all interact with and all think about. And it happens to people who work on movies, and it happens to people who watch movies, and therein lies the like collective reality thing where we all experience very similar versions of the same ideas of life and we all react to them differently. When you see that one shot, Laura Dern walking into the camera and she's got that like horrifying face, we all kind of feel that way about this particular issue. You know, David Lynch talks a lot about fire or darkness. However we personify those things, they still mean generally the same things to everybody. Easy semiotic things that you can look at and be like, I understand what that means. In and of itself exposes the deep truth of that thing, something that capital W we are all experiencing. The tagline of the movie is a woman in trouble. Well, gee, that sure is non-specific and nondescript. It's almost like that's an inherent thing. Like women in trouble is a narrative. There's no real specificity to get into because that's the inner workings of that meta-narrative itself. So the film as an artistic body, not really trying to tell you a story as much as it's trying to tell you that you're being told a story. David Lynch is a smart filmmaker in the sense that he makes you fall into a narrative so that he can tell you that you're experiencing a narrative. If this is so deeply true that anybody who watches this can experience basically the same level of like empathetic confusion, but at the same time, darkness, distrust, it's almost like that has something to do with the way that we experience reality. And when I say we, I mean capital W, we all experience reality to some extent. Yeah, I don't know, guys. Gee, I wonder what is freaking her out so bad. Something existential, perhaps? Is this anything? Everything that I've said so far is directly backed up by dialogue in the movie. If you just like watch the movie back, everybody's just saying this.
Sometimes they share, sometimes not.
I didn't know you before.
And Devin, you naughty boy, are you hiding a smile? Is your devilish mind scheming?
Why instigate a need to suffer?
They don't change, but they reveal. People having weird dreams and seeing things that wasn't there. I just wake up and find out what the hell yesterday was all about.
Blatantly saying that this is what's going on in the movie. The bad, scary thing is the meta-narrative. Everybody good in the movie, or anybody that's like a person in the movie, a person lost in the thing, and it could be anybody versus darkness, but the theme is very straightforward. Analyzing the film is actually fairly easy. Watching the movie is fairly hard. Trying to understand literally what is going on is hard. The same is true of other David Lynch movies, but it's really true here. This is the one where David is literally just being like, this one's about meta-narrative, that's all. It's the whole thing. It's all about the deep human stories. That's like all it's about. Specifically, the one deep human story, fears and desires that human beings deal with, and how those like lead to our reality falling apart, and like what exactly a nightmare entails. Something I said at the very beginning of the video was that like a nightmare can be like someone you love secretly hating you, all of your fears coming true. This movie is a nightmare in the sense that it is telling us that all of those fears coming true is human drama. Things that we don't want happening. And those things are almost always the same grab bag of a few different emotions. And those stories go throughout all of time. If ever a movie was just like, hello, no story is unique, it's this one. This one is basically telling you that all stories are just Inland Empire. Basically, all movies are Inland Empire. They just make more sense. That's the only difference. That's literally all. I suppose this is a good place to stop talking. I think I've said all the words. Do you think I've said all the words? I love that. I love it when I've done that. Now I can die. Thank God. If you were to watch the ending of the movie Inland Empire in isolation and just knew the things that I had just said, you'd probably be like, right. When the camera pans back, it's like her character dies. Like that meta-narrative dies. Derelict on the streets of LA, like, is a human story. They're doing the hug, she disappears. Like that is empathy, and the movie being over and like letting go of a character that's not real. Makes some sense. Anyway, the rest of this is up to you. I'm open to hearing your interpretations, although, as I said, I have read a lot of interpretations, but for some reason, nobody's just being like, it's about this. Except I will shout out my friend Malmrose Projects, who did a video on Inland Empire hellas ago. That's pretty good. You should watch that. But also, it's been like, I think that video came out like 11 years ago or 7 years ago. One of those numbers that's memorable for some reason. You can check that out if you want to bolster your interpretation further. I have a feeling that she and I have the same take, although mine is new. I did mine today. Could be in the future or the past or the present, depending on when you're watching the video, as the video is just a big long meta-narrative on how to analyze meta-narrative. As I said prior in the video, I probably could do like the other David Lynch movies. I just always thought that they were just like super straightforward. Like there wasn't a ton to analyze. Like I've been thinking about like Wild at Heart. I love Wild at Heart, but also everything in that movie feels very like straightforward. Mulholland Drive, very straightforward. I would be kind of open to doing that, but leave 1 million likes on this video and I'll do it. I will accept no less than 1 million likes. I did do Eraserhead a very long time ago. I didn't do Mulholland Drive. I didn't do Wild at Heart. I didn't do Blue Velvet, but I have a take on all of those. I'm actually incredibly lazy. I feel like, you know, you knock out the big broad concept. It's like, you know, this is about meta narrative. Boom, done, over. Okay, go analyze all of his movies through that lens, and I'll see you in 25 years. How's Annie? Anyway, I'm trying to talk more about like movies and ideas and stuff like that, and less about people being killed horribly in a terror. Like and subscribe, or I'll kill you.
What a heavy load Einstein must have had. Fucking morons.
Hi, I wanted to end the video off on that joke. It was very funny, and I need to tell you about my new book, which is out now. You can buy it. Look at it. It's like, it's here and it's lickable. Tastes bad. So I wouldn't recommend licking the book. I would read it. It's covered in acid. I coated the whole book in acid. So if you lick the book, you will trip. $18. Anyway, I'm tripping right now because I licked it. So anyway, you can pick it up in the links in the description, or you can buy it on the internet. It's on the internet anyway. I just needed to tell you because I was about to forget that I made a book.
Plaster of Paris bullshit.